Hi, I'm Rhett Crabtree, and this is the second of 4 5-minute theology videos on liturgy. Today, we're asking why do we go to church, and we're saying liturgy should provide clarity. There's a great big brown Kennedy toolbox in my garage, and frequently I find myself going out there to get a tool, only to stand there stupidly wondering, now, why on earth did I come out here in the first place? I want to suggest that this is exactly what happens with many Christians when they go to church. They know they're there for a reason, an important reason, but what on earth is it? In the previous video, I spoke of the importance of liturgy, namely that the Bible instructs us to have a logical liturgy in Romans 12:1. We also spoke of the Latin phrase, lex orandi, lex credendi, the law of prayer is the law of belief. How a worship service is ordered over time will certainly have an impact upon what you, the worshiper, believe. Now, to this end, I want to suggest that liturgy should clearly communicate why on earth we came to church in the first place. Biblically speaking, there are 5 movements of a logical liturgy. It should begin with calling, move to confession, then consecration, communion, and commissioning. To explain, in the call, it's a call to worship. God sovereignly calls us from the world. In the confession, we acknowledge our sin against God, turning to his promised grace in the gospel and receiving absolution. In consecration, the God who calls and cleanses us now comes to us in his word, reordering us. In communion, we sit down with our God, enjoying the blessing of close fellowship through the sacramental meal he's provided. And in consecration, we rise from this feast with his benediction, his blessing, to go out into the world equipped as his servants to be about his kingdom business. A liturgy like that will answer the important question very clearly of why do we go to church? But apart from this sort of liturgy, worshipers, I contend, will only be left with deficient answers as to what the Lord's Day is even for. Allow me to mention 2 common deficient answers. Number 1, some folks believe, well, we go to church for evangelism. You ever heard that? I certainly have. These folks are under the impression that evangelistic effectiveness is the foremost criteria for genuine worship. And so they say things like, if our worship service doesn't get people saved, our worship service isn't real worship. Now, this view is problematic for various reasons, but most obviously because it assumes the primary purpose of the Lord's Day is to benefit goats, rather than to benefit the sheep. The whole thing stood on its head, and frequently churches who embrace this sort of thing become more driven by consumerism over time than anything else. They ask, what does the religious consumer desire? Just tell us, we'll transform our church into some sort of sanctified Walmart, and we'll give seekers whatever will convince them to make a decision for Jesus, because apart from that, we're not really worshiping God. Now, of course, though evangelism is important, this view obviously confuses the important biblical categories of worship on the one hand and evangelism on the other. Worship is something that Christians do in the presence of God. Evangelism, on the other hand, is something that we do as we go out from his special presence. That's why the Lord said in the Great Commission, "Go, therefore, and make disciples." So, the primary purpose of worship is not evangelism. Now, a second deficient answer that springs from a deficient liturgy is this: we go to church to learn. You ever heard that? I have. And those who labor under this false assumption believe that every element of the service, whatever it is, prayers, singing, offering, whatever, these things are merely the warm-up routine for the pastor's sermon. So if the previous folks are obsessed with the question, do you have Jesus in your hearts? These folks are wondering, do you have Jesus in your heads? But the primary reason that this view is a deficient one is this: the Bible itself doesn't seem to place its greatest emphasis on teaching when it comes to corporate worship. Though teaching is, of course, a very important thing. Instead, the Bible emphasizes stuff like this, Psalm 95, "Oh, come, let us sing to the Lord. Let us make a joyful noise to the rock of our salvation. Let us come into his presence with thanksgiving. Let us make a joyful noise to him and sing our praise. Oh, come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker." So why do you go to church? Well, I contend that liturgy should provide the answer. And where it doesn't provide the answer, you'll end up with deficient answers. As we said in the previous video, worship is biblically marked by 5 movements: call, confession, consecration, communion, and commissioning. Now in the next video, we'll see where these 5 movements arise biblically. Spoiler alert, they arise from covenant, because worship is all about covenant renewal. But until then, my name's Rhett Crabtree, and this has been Liturgy as Clarity. Lord bless you until next time.